Thank you, Madam Speaker, and this has been a very interesting debate. However, I would like to take it in a different direction because I believe that before and after I speak, it will continue to go along the lines that it is. But oftentimes when we speak about marijuana and legalization and regulation, we don't tend to talk about why it's actually illegal in the first place. So I did a little research. And the New York Times reviewed the history of cannabis criminalization and found it has been racist from the outset in the 1930s. The campaign to make cannabis illegal was firmly rooted in prejudices against Mexican immigrants and African Americans who were associated with cannabis use at the time. It's interesting to note the word marijuana was popularized as a way to associate the plant with Mexicans. With that being said, there is a certain degree of cynicism one can develop in looking at social and power structures in the world. But sometimes you come across something so unexpected that it is like a sharp slap in the face. Dan Baum's mention of his New York Times interview with John Ehrlichman, counsel and assistant to the President for Domestic Affairs under Nixon, is one of those moments. And this is what Nixon's aide had to say. Quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or blacks. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did," end quote. Well, growing up in that era, you might have reasonably assumed that people pushing to criminalize drugs might have thought they were doing the right thing. But with all that we know now, the perfidy throughout the Vietnam War, the My Lai massacre, cold-blooded murder of civil rights advocates, the COINTELPRO program of the FBI, internment of American citizens during the Second World War simply because of their race or ethnic background, and the long list that a casual look at history could fill many times over. That someone might commit such an evil for their own ends can hardly be shocking. After all, the Nixon campaign embraced the so-called Southern strategy of playing on the prejudices of Southern whites to gain votes because black Americans tended to back for Democrats. When Ehrlichman called blacks and those opposing the war enemies, he meant it literally. They were political enemies that could potentially keep Nixon out of office, but Nixon himself proved to be his own worst enemy. Nevertheless, the United States government developed a major policy with massive implications on spending and societal impact to declare that two classes of people should be destroyed, locked up if possible, for the convenience and pleasure of people in power. The justice system was warped into a private enforcer. In the US, money becomes power, and that is a fact of history. So long as any economy needs concentrations of resources to attain anything, there will be disparities. But that type of practical recognition of some having more, some having less, is different than systemic income inequality that first, last, and always is an attempt to enthrone the chosen few, cloaking them in power on the backs of everyone else. That this country pursued a reckless policy, given how badly prohibition proved itself not that many decades before to reinforce the personal vendetta of a head of state, should be shocking. People's mouths should drop open, except the criminalization and creation of the other to fear, much as is happening in politics today with a different set of targets, has been too useful to too many. When the communist boogeyman collapsed, its instability in Russia and China began to recognize the need for a degree of independent industry, something had to take its place. The drug wars continued into the Reagan years. Bill Clinton then tried to prove himself tougher than any Republican with the 1994 omnibus crime legislation. He now admits that he made the problem of incarceration worse than it had been. That is a euphemism. What the policy did was stab millions in the back, all to get votes to stay in power. Policies like the Street Strikes rule that mandates someone to life imprisonment for nonviolent offenses are even more emasculating than Nixon. And even now, as the concept of marijuana legalization and regulation, African Americans and Latinos are arrested and convicted at much higher rates than any other, according to an analyst by the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. And yet, the country is slow to recognize how much it has targeted and continues to target those with the fewest resources to protect themselves. Once the machine starts, it keeps moving out of inertia, and over time, injustices seem normal. Well, let today be the day that connect.
The House will stand at ease, please.
Representative O'Neill of the 69th. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to explain the point of order that I earlier made in response to the discussion that we were having on this bill. First off, I raised the point because I believe that I had a valid point of order regarding the conduct of the debate. I don't want to rehash what that was, but I did raise the point on account of that. Number two, I believe that the only way for me, and perhaps the Speaker can correct me if I am wrong, if I have a point of order that I wish to raise, that I have to gain the attention of the Speaker, and because my microphone is not normally on, I have to raise my voice to a level that the Speaker can hear what I am saying to give me the attention to take up my point. And number three, I would like to indicate that I have no disrespect for any member of the chamber, certainly not for the person who was speaking at the time that I raised the point of order. However, the process that we have, which is that points of order have to be raised in this manner and cannot wait until the Speaker has finished speaking, requires effectively an interruption, which may seem inappropriate, but it's the only way that I know that we can proceed in accordance with the Mason's Manual and normal parliamentary procedure. And we have a lot of new people here, and perhaps we have people who have even been here for a term or two. There are times when points of order start to come fast and furious, especially at the end of the session. I will certainly raise points of order when I think it's appropriate, and I hope to gain the attention of the Speaker when it's necessary, and I hope everyone will understand that that is not meant by me, at least, to be disrespectful for anyone here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Your comments are very well taken.